Good evening, everybody. No. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. There you are. I'm glad you guys can make it. Glad you guys could come out this evening. A little bit chilly outside, but we're all here to be warm together, and we appreciate you being here. I'm Chuck Roberts, your interim executive director here at West Virginia Public Broadcasting, and we're happy to have you here at the Raleigh Playhouse. We're happy to hear you too. Hey, he's in charge. That's the boss right there. So when you came in, everyone got their little programs. You can that helps you follow along with the show. But also on the back side, there's space if you have questions or comments or anything you'd like to write down. And if so, and you'd like to turn that in, also include your email on the back. That'll allow us to be able to communicate with you and continue the dialogue. We want to thank everyone for being out here. We want to thank the Biggie family for hosting us here at the Raleigh Playhouse, and also for letting us have such a good spread downstairs at the Sir Walter Tavern, yep. And we want to thank especially Miss Susan L. Feller for the art that you saw displayed when you came in, down the hallway and downstairs, some of which, if I'm right, is listed for sale. So if you see anything really good that strikes your eye, please reach out or try to buy that. That'd be great for her. Also, everyone, if you could, silence your phones, your Blackberries, your pagers, whatever you have. If you'd like to take a picture, please use the available lighting. Don't worry about flashes. We don't need flashes going off all over the place. We also want to thank everyone who's involved here at Inside Appalachia. There's a lot of producers, a lot of people that work on it, but we especially want to thank Roxy Todd. Roxy's way up in the back. Hi, Roxy. Roxy worked on some of the videos with the video production piece and the other producers, Liz McCormick and Emily Hilliard. And we especially want to thank Daniel Walker for doing the work on the video pieces. Thank you, Daniel. And the producers themselves, Inside Appalachia, it's not a job. And we appreciate Roxy Todd and Jessica Lilly doing what they do, because it's a labor of love, telling the stories of West Virginia that not everyone gets to hear. So we want to thank them. Thank you very much for their work on that. We want to thank Tamarack, and we want to thank Hawk Knob for the cider we had downstairs. And we once again want to thank all of y'all for being here this evening. And without further ado, let's get the big ugly dude off the stage and bring up Miss Jessica Lilly.
I'm going to remember the microphone this time. Hey, how we doing? Welcome inside Appalachia. We're really excited to be here at the Raleigh Playhouse and Theater here in Beckley. I will say before we get started, this is one big experiment. So thank you all for being a part of it. It is our first live event and listening. We're going to be listening and watching some great produced piece about Appalachians and West Virginians. So we're excited about that. You know, West Virginia Public Broadcasting, we're a statewide entity, we're a statewide organization, and it was really important to me as well as the organization to come to Southern West Virginia. So again, I'm really excited to be here in Beckley, West Virginia. I take a lot of pride in this place, I think as most of you here, or all of you probably do, and the people who make it special, and that's you guys. So again, I'm just glad you could make it. On this show tonight, we've tried to capture just a few unique Appalachian stories because there are so many great minds and wonderful people who aren't in the spotlight and never have been. But today, we're shining our public broadcasting spotlight on some people and places that we hope, and that I hope, remind you of home. And that's what these stories remind me of home and my family and what you really see and you hear whenever you go home. And all the beautiful, complicated feelings and connections that come with some of those memories. Throughout the show, as Chuck mentioned, I hope you will take advantage and use those cards to write down. If you need a pen, we'll try to get you a pen. Let us know. But if you need a pen, we've got a few pens out front. We can get them to you if you want to jot down some ideas that you have. But as you listen to and watch the show tonight, we hope that you'll think about some memories and stories that you have. Okay. So last year, we'll start by watching a film. And here's a little bit about that film. Last year, a film that we produced in collaboration with the West Virginia Folklife Program was screened at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Yeah, that was pretty exciting. And the video featured Jim Schaefer, and it also went viral online, and people from New York to Florida who saw the story decided to come and visit Mr. Schaefer here in West Virginia to get one of his special handmade brooms. He said he was surprised that so many people consider him an artist because the way he sees it, what he told us, is that this is just a job he's been doing since 1946. He's since had to close his broom making business, but back when we visited him in fall 2016, his workshop was located outside his home in Loudondale, West Virginia, just outside of Charleston. So we recently found out that another broom maker has been learning to make brooms with Mr. Schaefer's help. We are excited to share this update with you. But first, let's watch the video we made last year with West Virginia State folklorist Emily Hilliard about Jim Schaefer.
I arrive at Charleston Broom and Mop on a brisk fall morning and make my way through the storage room, past rolls of straw, walls of tools hanging on pin boards, and dozens of brooms bundled and stacked in tall rows. I find Jim Schaefer inside his dusty workshop, standing at a machine that helps him attach straw to a broomstick.
Well, I'm James Schaefer. Most people call me Jim. I'm 87 years old, and I'm the owner of Charleston Broom and Mop Company here in Loudondale, only 1 mile short of Canal State Forest.
Jim is tall, sporting jeans and suspenders, with a friendly face and big smile. His hands move adeptly around the broomstick, adding straw by the handful. He's done this so long he doesn't need to measure. He can build a broom by feel. Jim's brooms are the classic straw variety, the image you get in your mind when you think of a broom. They have a wooden handle, natural straw with wire binding the two at the top, and 5 bands of colored thread sewn across the midline of the broom. Often this thread is red, but he also sews them with blue, green, yellow, or white thread. The broom style and the equipment he uses hasn't really changed since Jim first started making them when he was 17.
Well, the change has been in the usage of brooms, straw brooms. They have so many, instead of sweeping sidewalks and outside garage areas and everything, they use the gasoline blowers now to blow the dirt and dust away. Same thing in the house with these new laminate floors they have. They're so slick that they've developed dust mops type things for those sweeping the house and things, those that have those floors, and there's, you know, an awful lot of them. So the broom industry is fading out. I suspect another 5 to 7 years you won't find a straw broom in the store.
Today, Jim's main customers are local Lions clubs who buy them and sell them for their annual fundraisers.
If it wasn't for Lions clubs selling brooms as their fundraisers, I wouldn't have a business today. And you know, back 20, 30 years ago or further back, we didn't sell hardly any Lions clubs. It was all wholesale distributors. But Walmart, Kmart, and Kroger's have took all that over now, and you don't have any mom and pop stores to buy from the wholesale distributors, so they all went out of business.
Jim also sells at Pyle Hardware, a local store that's been operating on Charleston's west side for 84 years, just 3 years younger than Jim himself. Bill Pyle owns the store and says customers even make special trips to Charleston just to buy Jim's brooms.
He does that out of pride. I mean, when he turns out a broom, he wants it to be just right, and he's proud of it.
Bill is the third-generation owner of Pyle Hardware. Back when he was a teenager working for his dad, Bill's father sent him to buy brooms from Jim.
They just make a lot of different models, and most of them has to do with the size. There's a 6, there's an 8, and the 8's a little bit bigger. They make a Black Beauty that has black bristles in it. Then they make warehouse and railroad brooms, and they're usually a broom that's made to sweep heavy stuff.
If Jim Schaefer is shopping at a store other than Pyle, he makes sure to check out the broom competition. He judges a store based on the brooms they sell.
When I go into a store, I always check the broom rack to see what broom they have in the rack and how it's made, the quality of it, the quality of the straw they're using in it, as well as the price and everything.
How does a synthetic broom compare to one of your brooms?
The synthetics, plastic straw doesn't compare to a natural corn broom at all, the sweeping quality of it.
Along with the natural straw, another feature that makes Jim's brooms unique are the 5 bands of thread he sews across the broom to hold the straw together. This detail factors heavily in Jim's pride in his product, as well as his judgment of other brooms.
We see a lot of them in the store today with 3 bands or so, and I don't approve of that. And I don't think I've ever made an order for anyone with 3 bands. I have used 5 and 6, but it's just a matter of personal opinion to me as to that sewing of the broom makes the durability longer if it's sewn tight enough that it doesn't in time flex and come loose to where it flips instead of sweeps.
So you look down on a 3-band broom?
Well, sure. If whatever product you're into, anybody else don't come up to your standards, you don't approve of it.
While Jim may have slowed down, that's not apparent from the tall stacks of brooms lining his workshop. When Jim's gone, though, it isn't clear how the broom-making tradition will continue in West Virginia.
Well, when I finally give up on it, I guess it'll just die. I don't know. A lot of people in the Lions Club kind of worry about it. Some of them have even considered, trying to run it on their own. And but it's nobody's come up it's just not a profitable enough business to stay in unless you're basically in my position where you're Roosevelt's sending you that Roosevelt check every month, Social Security.
Jim has taught some apprentices over the years, but no one has stuck with it. When it comes to retirement, though, Jim isn't interested.
Well, you got to have something to do. And I feel great all day, every day, so I have to do something. Since if I wasn't here making brooms, I'd be maybe over at McDonald's making hamburgers or something. I mean, you need to keep yourself occupied and busy if you're able to. And thank goodness I've been able to pretty much all my life.
Jim says that the only downfall to his job is that he does get lonely.
Sometimes I'll go a week without somebody walking through the door, but it really doesn't bother me a whole lot, but I do enjoy company.
To pass the time while he works, Jim keeps his radio tuned to WQBE, Country and Western. And he's worn out a number of radios in his time on the job. There's at least 3 stacked in his workshop, covered with cobwebs and broom straw. While he makes hundreds of brooms a week, he said he doesn't really sweep his own shop. But Jim always appreciates visitors. He'll even make a special broom for you, right on the spot. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Emily Hilliard in Loudondale.
1 year after that story about Jim Schaefer aired, West Virginia Public Broadcasting went to learn the story of another broom maker, a woman named Wanda Hott, who lives near Romney in Hampshire County. She originally reached out to Jim Schaefer several years ago to ask for his help learning to make brooms.
Well, actually, I got into broom making because my sister wanted to know what I wanted for Christmas one year, and I needed a broom. I wanted a practical broom, and she got me a broom from Jim Schaefer. And I looked at it, and I thought,
Wanda Hott fell in love with that broom and remembered her great-great-grandmother used to make brooms. She wanted to learn how to make them too and started teaching herself. For some help, she reached out to Jim Schaefer.
I just picked up the phone and gave him a call, and he answered about the 7th ring, probably.
Wanda began buying broom-making supplies from Jim, and they became friends.
We went to Charleston to meet Jim and to learn how to make brooms. He was very patient and did not mind showing how to make a broom and how to sew it. And he had brooms everywhere and broom corn, and that was just down my alley. That's what I wanted to learn.
Wanda has been making brooms for the past 13 years now. And then last year, Jim Schaefer called her and told Wanda he had decided he was not able to continue making brooms. Hoping to pass on his craft to the right person, he offered to sell her his broom-making equipment. And she accepted. Wanda hopes her broom-making business will be her main source of income once she retires from her day job driving a school bus. And as it turns out, 2 of her granddaughters, Shelby and Kira, have taken a particular interest in the broom-making craft as well.
It sparks my interest. It's something that I'm able to actually sit down and do or pay attention to, and it doesn't lose my interest. I'm a really hands-on person, so I really like to be able to feel something and have it in my hands, and broom making is a really good way to do that. And I like spending family time because I think spending time with family is really important, so it's kind of a way to do both for me.
I'm not sure really how it happened. It just evolved. I learned to make the broom to start with, and then I would teach my sister and our friend, and when somebody came, family members came, they would jump in, and it was a big thing.
Yeah.
So just teach them, anybody wants to see, we teach them how to make brooms.
The brooms made with Jim Schaefer's equipment take about 25 minutes to finish, and they sell for about $17. Wanda sells them to local Lions clubs, just like he did. In addition, she and her family also make a variety of decorative brooms by hand without the machine. Since they take longer to make, she sells those for up to $50.
When we were making a broom by hand with the 3 of us doing it, we had no 2 brooms are alike. Everything's different.
Wanda hopes broom making continues to be a big part of her family's tradition. For Shelby and Kira, they want to continue that tradition too.
I think it's a really great thing that there are still people around that still want to make brooms, because it is a really neat and wonderful thing to learn, especially if you're a person who likes to pick up different hobbies. It's a really neat hobby and it's a really neat thing to get to do. It's something that I think should be passed on. People should know how to do it, because you're not going to always have plastic and you're not always going to have the machines. I mean, this is something that you can, the broom corn's something you can grow and make it yourself. You don't have to go and buy it.
Wanda Hott's brooms have been getting noticed. She's even had customers as far away as California and Illinois. And with her entire family also interested in making brooms, for now, it looks like this art form won't be disappearing in West Virginia anytime soon. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Liz McCormick in Kirby, West Virginia.
I always think about extra credit. That's okay. I was the same.
All right, quick set change. And ladies and gentlemen, Jim Schaefer. So, Jim, what'd you think about seeing that up on the big screen like that?
Well, it's, I don't know, it kind of gives you an odd feeling, you know, to see yourself up there, which you never expected to happen.
Yeah.
I still to this day don't understand how West Virginia Broadcasting did what they did for me, you know, as far as publicizing me and everything. So it's been quite a run.
Well, I think that your work is incredible, and it's quite impressive, and it's really an honor, I think, to share your story. So I really appreciate you sharing it, and it's really an honor to be able to have you here for sure.
Yeah. Well,
and I heard some reaction from the audience too. It sounds like there was some laughter and some rustling, where it sounds like you all could relate to, and you probably know someone that's a lot like Mr. Schaefer as well. So I think that it sounds like there's a lot of people who can relate to it and appreciate it as well.
yeah.
So we also, in that video, we heard and we got to meet Wanda. So do you remember when you first started teaching Wanda how to make a broom?
Well, first time, I don't know whether the first time I met her, I talked to her quite a while and made brooms and whatnot. I don't know as I actually showed her how or had her to make the second time. I went through the process of making the broom with it and showing her how, where each handful of straw went and how it should be done. Not that I'm a professional.
Well, I certainly think you're an expert in broom making.
Of doing everything that right, but you know, I hung on quite a while, few years, and so evidently I done a pretty good job of making it. But
well, I'd say I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. Come on now.
Well,
but in the video, you said you didn't expect broom making to be around much longer.
no, that you know, you go into Kroger's now. You Kroger's or any of your supermarket type grocery stores. You're lucky if you find a broom in the rack. They, as far as straw brooms concerned, some of them carry them, some of them don't. But the plastics, the different aspects of life, of the different types of sweeping they do, and the different machines they have to do the sweeping and the blowing, instead of using a broom, has just brought it down to a little bit of nothing.
So I guess you still feel like that broom making isn't going to be around much longer?
No.
No?
No, what I see now is almost all made in Mexico, and the quality is not. Of course, they don't have no competition of good brooms, so they don't have to make quality merchandise. But the sales are not there; they're dwindling too, and it's all on a downhill swing.
Well, and you mentioned that it would be tough to make a whole lot of money making brooms nowadays.
Yes,
was it always like that though?
Well, it was always pretty much that way. It was always a minimum wage job, except for assembling the broom and sewing the broom. They were piecework. You got paid for each broom you threw it on the floor. If you stopped and took a smoke or anything, you didn't make a penny.
Oh.
Or anything else you stopped for.
Oh.
So it was strictly a piecework deal. Mm-hmm. And so I was in that area myself. I always done the sewing of the brooms, so I started in. Mm-hmm. So I always fared pretty well as compared to the open market. Mm-hmm. But the broom shop as a group, doing the finishing of the brooms, getting the straw ready and everything for the broom makers and all, it was minimum wage.
Mm-hmm. So I take it you'd like to see broom making continue, though?
Well, it's not going to continue, I don't think,
okay.
Here in the United States.
So, but you did find, I think we heard in the video, that Wanda bought your equipment. She seems to be still making brooms.
Yes, she's still making brooms, and she's not making brooms for the commercial market. If you're making the brooms for the commercial market, the price is so low, you have to compete with Mexico. She's making a homemade broom, and she's charging a fair price for it instead of competing with Mexico's prices. You just can't do it.
So what made you decide to sell your equipment?
Health. I just got to where I'd go down there every morning to the shop and go in, and I'd make half a dozen brooms. We work a half hour or maybe a little longer, and I'd get so tired I had to sit down. And it's just progressively gotten worse. And Wanda offered to buy my equipment, and I said, well, I think it's time for old Dad to leave. So I just sold it out, and I got lucky enough to sell all my old. I had quite a bit of old equipment, and I sold quite a bit. Well, I sold all of it, actually. Mm-hmm. Some guy down in Alabama bought a lot of it.
Oh, really?
He specializes in.
Well, and this probably gives you some more time with your wife, right?
Gives me more time, but I ain't able to do anything.
Oh.
Sit there in the chair all day and feel like a crazy. You can't get up and get out and do anything. 5 minutes out there and you're just ready to sit down. You have to sit down. That's my position now. I get so short of breath and I'm so weak I just can't do it.
Well, we're glad you're here and we could get you a chair so we could chat.
Anywhere I go, I need that.
In the video, you say you've tried to get several people interested in making brooms and teaching them, but it hasn't stuck with most of them. Apart from Wanda Hott, are there others in West Virginia who you could see making brooms in the future? Nope.
No. I've taught quite a few how to make brooms and different things along that line, but none of them ever stayed.
Well, what is it? Are they just that stubborn? I mean,
well, it's you have to work constantly. You don't have to work hard, but you have to work all day.
You have to work.
As I say,
so that's the problem. They don't want to work.
They don't want to work. Yeah. Not using their hands. They want to use computers.
A quick reminder to the audience that here in a minute I've got a couple more questions and then we're going to open it up to the audience. So if you have questions for Mr. Schaefer, write them down or just get ready. I think we have somebody in the audience who will come around and they'll hand you a microphone so you can ask those questions. Why do you think it's so challenging? I think you just answered this actually, and I'm looking at my paper. But why do you think it's so challenging to get people interested in learning something like broom making? Is it the computers, you think? People are used to using computers?
Well, it's just a matter of not wanting to work primarily with your hands and building something. We don't build nothing in West Virginia anymore that I know of. You know, we manufacture chemicals and all that kind of things and assemble machinery and stuff like that. But we don't actually take anything from Mother Nature and produce a product.
And I don't know of a whole lot either. We're also hoping to find out about perhaps some more places like broom making and Reed's Mill and places that make things. So if you have any stories or ideas about that, keep those in the back of your mind, and we're going to go over that at the end of the show and just talk about different ideas and story ideas that you might have. But at this time, we're going to open it up to the audience. Does anybody have any questions? I think we're going to open it up.
If you have any, speak loud. I can't hear very well. I'm sorry.
There you go. Yeah, I learned that lesson. Sorry about that. But if you have questions, oh good, we have a couple questions. Molly Bourne, you made it, hey.
Hey, sorry I'm late.
No.
Hi, can you just tell us your name, where you're from?
I'm Megan Hamilton from Fayetteville, West Virginia, on the beautiful New River Gorge. Mr. Schaefer, it was fascinating to watch the movie, and I had two questions. The first question was, what drew you to broom making when you were 17? And why did you continue to do it for so long? And the other question is, when I go to a restaurant that has a bunch of Lions Club brooms for sale, how do I know which broom is yours and which one's Wanda's?
Ooh.
Well, I don't know about Wanda, but mine will have a label on it saying Charleston Broom.
Oh, right.
No, I'm sorry. It won't. Because I did discontinue that quite a while back.
But the ones you did earlier.
I don't know how you could. I haven't seen Wanda's brooms. That to know what she's making and if her standard is anywhere near close to mine.
Pretty high.
That's just a matter of fact, and I don't mean to knock Wanda. She's a great person, but without seeing hers, I can't tell you.
Go back to the original question. I asked you two questions at once. I was wondering why, when you were 17, you wanted to start making brooms, and why
I didn't want to. I just wanted to go to work. And there was, I think, 3 different friends of mine that lived in the area that I live in, working at the broom factory in Charleston. And they told me there was an opening over there. I was 17 years old and getting ready to go out on the world here and get me a job, make $1 or $2. And I went over and applied for the job and got it and stuck with it. I tried to get out of it many times. A lot of summers we would be down to 3 days a week working. And those other 2 days I was out hunting for a job. And I would have taken almost anything that would have come along. But everything else was slowed down at the same time I was. So I don't know whether I was never fortunate enough to get a job or whether I was fortunate enough not to get a job. But anyway, the broom, it just kept coming back, and it was an up and down situation. In the summer, you had very little work, and once the school started in the fall, you got all your school orders in for brooms, and you was busy the rest of the year pretty much with that. Excuse me. So it was just one of those cycles that you get stuck in, and I don't know whether it was good that I got stuck with it or whether it would have been much better if I'd got a job somewhere else. You just can't judge what might have happened to you if you hadn't gone the route you did.
Reminds me of some folks that I know who talk about their jobs and how they want to do certain things, or they don't like their job, or they don't like work, and work is work.
I like work.
Right, and work isn't always easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I talked to a few folks before during the mixer downstairs, and we talked about how hard Roxy and I and the other folks who work on Inside Appalachia work on the show, but it's, when it's a passion, it doesn't seem like work. But there are times when there are things, even for the show, that it's work. It's not always.
It's not something that just comes to you.
Right. So that's kind of what that reminds me of. It's a difference. Was there other folks that had questions, or was that just my son, my beautiful son in the background in the very last row waving at me? I don't know.
Mr. Schaefer, I'm Bob Matson here from Beckley. And I got a question for you. The corn straw looked very uniform, but it also looked like it had to be a industrial type of I'm not sure. Where are you getting your corn straw from, or where did you get it from for so many years?
Well, years ago, back in, a long time ago, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Texas, and all of them out New Mexico grew broom corn. Well, I don't know. And we got it. There was some shipped in from Mexico back in, but there was a tariff on it. They just like now, Trump's putting tariffs on everything for China, and all of us giving trouble. And we managed, and there was a limit on how much they could ship in before the price to the Mexicans went up on the tariff thing. So that controlled it pretty well for quite a few years. But then, I don't know, I think about 1968, something like that, we set up the Mexicans to grow broom corn, went down there and improved their land, improved their watering system and everything at our expenses to where they could grow broom corn, and it all migrated to Mexico within a matter of 2 or 3 years because of their labor situation. And so Oklahoma, Colorado, and Texas, and all them, all they grow now is the seed for planting broom corn. Instead of broom corn for making brooms. They use what they grow for making brooms, but they don't grow it for that purpose. They grow it for the seed.
Do you have another question? Tyler, you don't have a question. Let's see, can we see what his question is? He really might have a question. I'm a little nervous.
When you made the brooms, the girl who made the brooms, was that your daughter?
I didn't understand him.
Wanda, he asked if Wanda was your daughter.
No, Wanda's no relation.
Good question. Thank you, Tyler. Anybody else? Okay. Mr. Schaefer, do you have any closing thoughts or?
Not really. I'm proud and glad that I managed to hang on the 72 years that I worked at making brooms, but it just got to where I couldn't do it.
I have to ask, any advice to young people? Any advice to young people?
No, just get out there and work and do something. Doesn't matter whether it has a computer to push or not, or something to do. Whatever you get into, whether it's making hamburgers or anything else, try to do it right and try to do a good job of it. That's what they're paying you for. Mm-hmm. And so it might not be the best in the world, but you'll get along.
Thank you very much. Jim Schaefer, one more round of applause. Thank you so much. Okay, up next, we're talking about making cornmeal and flour the old-fashioned way at one of the last operating grist mills in West Virginia. We'll be right back. I want to take just a quick moment to recognize our musicians that are helping with our transitions. Trevor Hammonds and Sarah Riley of Pocahontas County. As you've heard this evening, they play traditional music of West Virginia, including songs from the Hammonds family. The Hammonds family is a family of music makers and folklorists whose influence on music in the mountains of West Virginia date back to the 1800s. So that's pretty cool. Many of their songs have roots in British ballads and songs that would have been played by many of the earliest European settlers in our region. So let's give them another round of applause. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, 100 years ago, grist mills weren't just a place where people went to get cornmeal and flour. They were also gathering places for communities. But supermarkets replaced the local grist mill economy, and few working mills are still in operation today. Here's Inside Appalachia producer Roxy Todd sharing what she found at Reed's Mill in Monroe County.
My mother and dad separated and we moved away from here. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder. I just always wanted to come back.
Like so many people who grew up in West Virginia, the man who owns Reed's Mill, Larry Mustaine, says he had to leave the state to see the region's real value. He and his uncle, Aubrey Reed, farmed together when he came back to West Virginia in 1975. He spent a lot of his childhood here, helping his uncle inside the mill. When his uncle passed away, Mustaine decided to follow in his footsteps.
So much of what he taught me and what I knew, it's just in me. I don't even know it's there. There's a famous story they told about in the 50s that someone from the Greenbrier Hotel came here wanting a bag of yellow cornmeal to make cornbread for Eisenhower. At the time the guy came, my uncle was grinding white corn. And he told the guy that I just don't have any yellow. I could grind you some tomorrow, but I don't have any today. And the guy said, but it's for the president. Couldn't you grind some right now? And my uncle said, no. He can wait just like everybody else. I think that's the main thing I remember about him. He was a character.
Mustaine sells a special heirloom corn called Bloody Butcher. This corn has been passed down for generations, just like this mill.
There's a formula that you have to follow to select seed corn from the Bloody Butcher. It's an open pollinated corn. You just plant it over and over. You don't have to get new seed every year like hybrid corn. And he had a formula of what he would pick out. So many reds, so many orange, so many white, so many speckled ears. And I should have wrote all that down. But I just, even though I was in my 40s and 50s after I came back here, I guess I just always thought he was going to be here.
Today, Reed's Mill attracts visitors from all over the state and beyond.
I've been here, I don't know how many times I've been here. Met Larry, who's a very interesting person. And I keep coming back. I'll just come attached to it, I guess.
Napier lives in Florida half of the year and in West Virginia during the summer. He says he's visited 40 mills across West Virginia. Reed's Mill was built in the late 1700s, but is in good shape compared with others in the state.
I've been in 4 mills, I think they're still grinding in the state. But, you know, they don't do very much grinding at all anymore in the mills.
The creek that runs behind the mill, and which used to power the stone grinder, begins here, at the base of Peters Mountain. This small but mighty creek once powered dozens of mills. Today, only Reed's Mill remains.
Well, I think the ones that are here will be here. I think so. Because, you know, it's part of history, and we've lost enough of them.
Steve Dransfield lives a few miles from this mill. Like Mustaine, his family has been farming in this valley for generations.
And it's just something you just never see anymore. I think it would be a real tourist draw to the area if we could have a few of these mills that are left standing to be fully operational.
He says Reed's Mill is part of his history too, and he'd like to help Mustaine continue to keep the mill going.
It was always my dream to see all the belts and pulleys going and the water flowing through and the turbines turning and the grindstones grinding. But you know what he's able to do, you can come here today and you can see at least a small portion of what the whole operation was.
Mustaine is in his 80s, and he keeps this mill going the best he can. But he's getting older, and he says he's not sure who will be here to help take over the mill after him. He has hopes that someone in his family, maybe one of his sons, will decide to take it on. But he's not ready to quit yet. Today, he grinds cornmeal and flour with an electric stone grinder. But his dream is to see the millstones up and running again, so the mill will grind cornmeal the old-fashioned way. For now, Mustaine says he's happy just to continue grinding. He sells heirloom cornmeal, whole wheat flour, and another West Virginia specialty, buckwheat flour.
I'm clear out of buckwheat flour. And I've had 2 people, people was here the other day going to St. Augustine, Florida, wanted buckwheat. I just can't keep up.
Although drop-in customers can sometimes find the mill open as they pass through Monroe County, Mustaine recommends people call ahead to make sure he can give visitors a tour. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Roxy Todd in Monroe County, West Virginia.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Larry Mustaine. And I hear he's brought quite a posse with him, or quite a group, right? You roll deep whenever you come to places, huh, Mr. Mustaine? You got a lot of family here with you.
We take our own crowd with us wherever we go.
That's what I like. Let me adjust this for you. Oh, sorry. Okay, so what did you think about seeing that video up on the big screen?
Well, it's sort of like Mr. Schaefer. I've never been there before, so to speak. I also want to say something before you get to asking me questions.
Okay.
Mr. Schaefer, as a child, I was influenced so much by older people, and we had our own broom factory at Second Creek. It was run by a fellow named Everett Hogsett, who had been born before the Civil War and lived up to 1949. And you talk about the quality of things. I have one broom there in that mill that I still use, that was probably made by Mr. Hogsett about 1945.
Wow.
Yeah, you need to come to see the broom, if for no other reason. He was such a character, and he could remember things that had happened in that part of Monroe and Greenbrier County during the Civil War. So after we went away, went to college and became a school teacher, and history was always an interest of mine, and I think it was because of what he told me that he had lived. Mr. Schaefer also reminds me so much of my uncle, and my uncle caused me to think that I'm 82 now. I think Mr. Schaefer's 87, but I don't think there's anyone on earth below 85 that has any common sense. When I say that, people will say to me, well, how old are you? And I say, I'm 82 and I ain't got a lick of sense. I don't know. I was just raised by older people, my uncle included, and I guess I was trained to do as I was told and not question things. But then I'm a liberal Democrat, so. I can't. Well, get on with the interview, though.
Okay, moving on. They called you an interesting person in that video, one gentleman did, and you talked about other people who are characters. You think you're a little bit of a character there, too, Mr.
No, I'm too young. I don't qualify.
This video wasn't the first time that you've talked to producers or reporters. Roxy Todd has made quite a few pieces about your work and stories from your mill, like Bloody Butcher Corn. What's been the reaction from these stories so far? Not just this one, but all of them.
Well, it's sort of sad because generally when the piece she put in the paper is when I first realized I couldn't do what I was needed to do. I kept getting so many customers I couldn't keep up. But I don't know. That's the other thing with Mr. Schaefer's interview, that the past is being lost, and I don't know that we even understand it. And there again, I blame myself for not learning more from the older people in my family. And it's just like an example here lately, the Bloody Butcher I've been grinding. People come and tell me, that cornmeal's making brown cornbread. Why is that? And that's that formula that my uncle taught me. If you put too much red in the ears in it as you plant the seed, then it makes too much red corn, and that makes the cornmeal brown. And someone's been raising it for me. My wife's had some sickness and, in fact, passed away back in the spring, and I couldn't raise it. And one fellow that was raising it for me was just, I guess he liked red, so he was putting too much red in the seed. And I was grinding it and not thinking about it until people started And then the sad thing there is now they all want it red because they like the brown cornbread better.
And I understand you brought some samples. There were some samples out front too, right? What did you bring with you?
We had a wedding and we had fixed some cornmeal in little jars, and then some apple butter. We also sell apple butter, and so I brought some of those that were left over from the wedding.
I'm glad. Awesome. So if you were lucky enough to get that, yes.
So they're out there as samples. I also wanted to recognize Elmer Napier, who's here somewhere, and he's traveled all over West Virginia and the East, documenting and taking pictures of old mills and old mill sites. And he makes calendars, and some of them are laying around somewhere that people might like to look at. I don't know. It just bothers me that we're losing so much of the past, and I'm plagued with two problems there with the water power. Mainly is just so much mud and silt in the creeks anymore that I have to clean the mill pond out more than I ever did before. And then the other thing is that mill was built in 1790, and we've got powder post beetles that I guess have been dormant since 1790, and they had to pick my time to hatch out and start eating the wood. And so, and there's just so much that we've lost, and I have questions, and there's no one over 90 that's here to answer them for me.
Why do you think it's so important to try to hold on to some of those things? What questions should we be asking? What should we be learning?
Well, a lot of it, my uncle was so strict with me and so forth, and my mother and his sisters were both school teachers, and his mother was a school teacher, but he was never able to get an education, and he was very demanding on me. And when I got my first degree, he said, "Well, that's great, and I'm glad to see you getting an education, but I just hope you don't become one of these people that's educated beyond your intelligence." And then
sounds like a smart man.
When I got my master's degree, he said, "Well, now I know you're educated beyond your intelligence." But I forgot the question.
I love where this is going. We don't have to go back to the question. Why do you think it's important to?
Well, the thing right now, and that's why I got down the path of being a teacher. I don't understand all this, but this genetically modified GMOs. And my understanding of that is that, like the Bloody Butcher corn, you plant the seed over and over again, and it has more germ in it. The distillers have discovered it for making their product, which the moonshiners knew that years ago, that it was better than hybrid corn. But it's just something that there's so many things that have come along that I don't understand it all. And of course, Bloody Butcher, my uncle always said he liked raising Bloody Butcher corn because you could carry it in your arm like stove wood. It's a big ear of corn if it's raised right. And it'll have 14 rows of grain around the cob. So why did they start raising hybrid then? That's your question. But the reason is that Bloody Butcher and a lot of the open pollinated corn has too much cob, so the people thought of it as being wasteful. My uncle always said too that when they first started making silage and using corn choppers for silage, a lot of the people still raised open pollinated corn for their silage even, but it was so tough. The stalk sometimes will get 15 feet tall that the chopper couldn't chop it. So that, I guess, is why hybrid was developed. But I'm told now that some of the GMO or hybrid corn, one enemy of corn is a worm, a bug. It gets at the root and eats the root and it falls over. That now some of this genetically modified corn, if the bug bites the corn, it kills the bug. Well, my question is, okay, so if I eat the corn, what's it going to do to me? And so much of it, when Bloody Butcher corn started showing up just recently in the past 10 or so years in seed catalogs, they were selling it for $40 a pound because of ornamental. It's nice to hang on your door and so forth. Well, at the time I was selling cornmeal for $1.50 a pound, and I thought, well, maybe I am educated beyond my intelligence.
In the video, Mr. Mustaine, you mentioned that you want to see the mill restored. So you talked about those bugs, but what would it take to make that happen and restore?
There's nothing there really that needs restoring. I mean, I need to kill the bugs, and I need to clean the mill pond out. It was a side wheel mill up until the 1880s, and then it was converted to water turbines, which are still made by Leffel and Company out in Springfield, Ohio, and you can still get parts for them and everything. But what I've asked for help with is there some way you could put a pump in the bottom of the mill pond that as the silt settles, you could just pump it out and spread it instead of waiting. Right now, there's probably 7 feet of mud in my mill pond. And you have to shut the water off from the main creek, and it takes about 2 months for it to dry down to where you could dip it out with a end loader. And what's happened over the years, we're all poor people, and my kids all have jobs, and then I guess, finally admitted I've got old, and we just can't keep ahead. And the main thing I've asked with this declaring it as endangered is just for technical help, you might say. Could you put a pump in the bottom of it that would pump the stuff out? And then with the powder post beetles, what Orchid says is that, yeah, they're bad. They're not like a termite, and they will eat it down if you don't do something to get rid of them. But the punchline of his story was, but it won't happen in your lifetime. They're real slow. Which somehow that didn't give me much comfort. I don't know.
You mentioned the endangered list, so you put it on it's now on the historical...
Endangered list.
There you go. Historical, I just wanted to make sure I got it right, but historical endangered list. And by putting it on that list, it opens up the doors for more ways for people to help or raise more awareness about it?
Basically, just tell them what you need help with, which what I've said is I need help with the bugs and then help with the mud. And they've come and visited us, and they're going to help any way they can. But it is kind of frustrating because so much of it is just stuff we always did ourselves. We didn't ask for... My uncle had put the mill and the water system itself on the historic register back in the 70s before he passed away. And back then, and then we had a big flood. That's something else I wanted to mention. On public TV, back when I used to be addicted to watching it all the time,
and you don't anymore? Come on now.
Well, I'm back to doing it, but okay. There was a movie that was on there somewhere back probably in the 80s, and it was called The Mill, and it was about an old mill over in Scotland, I think, that the fellow that had owned it and everything actually reminded me of my uncle. He was kind of a bachelor, and then he died, and there was kind of a squabble over the ownership of the mill, which we went through that too when my uncle died. And then I think one of his daughters ended up with the mill, and she was running it. And then the next thing you know, there was a big flood, and it just inundated the place. Well, I'd bought this mill after my uncle died in 1989. In 1996, we had a flood. And I thought, the movie's coming to life. And it washed the dam away, and it washed a tree that big around into, where they showed the water there that comes into the turbines. And we cleaned it all up ourselves. My son, Pat, who's sitting right there, did most of the work. And we rebuilt it. And so we've been there before. But I guess back in 96, I wasn't 82 years old, and it seems like it went better. But I don't know. Stone grinding, that's another thing that is being lost. And right now we're grinding on an electric stone grinder, and the stones on that set this way. Whereas the big stones that we used to use that are still there and usable lay flat. So my uncle in his time, he ran the place for 70 years, and he wouldn't use the little stones because he said they heat the grain. And they do. When it comes out of there, it's a little bit warm, not bad, but then the big stones, they're probably that wide, and they turn slower, and they don't heat the grain. And there again, it's just, I mean, I was raised there, and it's like I said about not knowing how to pick out the corn. I just always thought that he was going to be there to tell me what to do, because that's the way I was raised.
So what does it matter if it heats the corn? Here, again, common sense probably, but...
Well, one thing which we've always done, my uncle never did do this, but we don't add any preservatives to anything. So when I grind flour, buckwheat, cornmeal, or anything, I refrigerate it. But what could happen is if you didn't refrigerate it and it got warm and then cooled down, it could sweat and it could mold. So, of course, by refrigerating it, you're hopefully going to cut that out of happening.
And another reminder for the audience, we will be asking, if you have any questions for Mr. Mustaine, we'll be taking audience questions a little later, so start getting those ready. Does anyone seem to be picking up on mill traditions that you know of?
There are some, and there are also people that are getting into the open pollinated corn raising. I've had 3 people, one lady that Ms. Roxy wrote up in Craigsville, and her father and her farm together, and he's 96, and he's rewriting my formula, so I'll know to not put too much red in the corn, because he remembered it. And then that's the other thing I've tried to do is anyone that wants to raise Bloody Butcher or Hickory King or any of the old open pollinated corns, if I have it, I'd more than glad to give them seed if they don't want more than a pound or so. But it needs to come back. And there again, I'm not a scientist and I don't understand how it relates to this GMO stuff, but it does somehow. And it just tastes better.
Okay, I think we're going to open it up now. If you have any questions, I think we're going to bring some lights up. Got a few questions there. While Molly makes her way with the microphone, can I tell a quick story about common sense? Just a quick story. So when I was young, my parents always told me, Jessica, you're so smart, but you ain't got a lick of common sense. So when I was in 3rd grade, my English teacher said, she said, okay, here's a test for you. But don't worry, it's pretty easy because nobody knew about it. She sprung it on us. Don't worry, it's pretty easy. It's all common sense. And I freaked out. So I raised my hand and I said, Miss Callahan, my parents say I don't have any common sense. Touché.
That's something else.
My common sense story.
Need to tell about the President Eisenhower story. My uncle never would admit whether that story was true about him or not, but my mother was still living, and she was living in Newport News, Virginia, and it was written up in the papers by the Associated Press reporter named Blizzard. I can't remember what his first name was, but my mother was reading it and said, well, he refused to grind cornmeal for President Eisenhower. That's the way he was. That sounds exactly like him. But then her punchline to the story was, but if it had been a good Democrat, he'd have ground it for him. And that's the way my uncle was. And I'm ashamed, but I'm exactly the same way. He would sit and listen. He'd come in from work and he'd sit at the TV and watch President Reagan giving a speech, and he'd act like he was taking it all in and listening to every word, and he'd maybe even comment on some of it, but then he'd get up to walk away and he'd say, "Boy, he sure is a good actor." I've been told to not get into politics, but I'm sorry.
This is live. So I think we have a question here.
I have to tell one other thing. My wife, who just passed away back in May, and I am never going to be right again, but the more, 61 years we was married, and the more I lived with her, the more I realized I think I married my grandmother Reed, because my grandmother and all the Reeds of our bunch was radical Democrats. My wife was worse. In this recent campaign with the lady and the man that won, and by then she had Alzheimer's, and she was to the point where she couldn't speak or anything, but she'd be watching TV, and when he would get to talking, she'd grit her teeth. It's actually a sad way to be, because, you know, probably anymore there isn't much difference between Democrat or Republican.
My name is Mary. I live in Green Sulphur Springs. I have a question and then a comment. Why do you think there's more silt and mud in the creek now than there used to be?
I don't understand it exactly, but the big flood, the 1,000-year flood, which comes every 100 years, that hit White Sulphur. And then we had, ours was in 96, but not as bad. And Second Creek rises from about 2,400 feet at Gap Mills off of Peters Mountain. At my mill, the elevation marker is 1,863 feet. It's fell almost 600 feet in no more than 10 or 15 miles. It picks up rock, and it carries the rock till it levels off, and then it drops and makes an island that pushes the flow into the banks, and then the bank caves in, and that ends up in the mill pond. And a lot of it, I think, though, why it's worse also is from highway ditches they cut and so forth.
I want to thank Inside Appalachia for bringing these stories to, you know, to us and the radio listening audience, because I think that's a good first step to helping preserve some of these traditions, just to bring it to light. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. And that certainly goes with Roxy Todd. I just can't I can't say your name enough, Roxy Todd. She's in the very back, but she can't hide, and she's the producer for Inside Appalachia, and certainly it's a team effort for the show. Thank you. Do we have another question? I won't share any more of my stories.
My name is Debbie, and one thing is I wanted to say was, I'm sorry. Tell us where you're from. I'm from Beckley. So these things won't be lost. Have you thought about writing a book and writing everything down so that, you know, it'll be preserved for history? And the other thing I wanted to say was, you know, with you not getting people interested in doing this, and so that it's not lost, and how the governor wants to promote tourism, I think maybe that, you know, maybe there would be some money there to help you maybe promote it with tourism, and maybe get some help to you know, run it, as well as, you know, people involved.
We've done some tourism. The elder hostel tours used to always come and so forth, and Gibbs Kinderman, who's here, that's helped me so much, and even in my principal career at Hillsborough, he and I have talked about, I don't know what, there's things we're looking at.
Now that you're awake? Sorry about that. Sorry.
And then writing a book. One of my granddaughters got a degree in journalism. Is she here? But she
Here's looking at you, kid.
So I thought, okay, now I'll get my book wrote, but she moved away to Charlotte, and The other thing I always say about the book, so much of what I've got to put in there, I'd have to specify that it couldn't be published for 40 years, or I would be sued by some of my neighbors. Roxy and I have talked about this too. Our old cemetery in Methodist Church, Highland Park Methodist Church, which is up on the hill above the mill, on land that was donated by the McDowell family that had built the mill in the 1790s. And I've told Roxy, it in that area in itself could be a story. The cemetery, I'm caretaker there at the cemetery, and we have a Revolutionary War soldier that was buried in that cemetery that died in the 1830s. And it's so fascinating to me, who was he? His last name is Smith, and there just wasn't many Smiths that lived around that part of Monroe and Greenbrier. But I'm determined to somehow find out, who was he and why did he end up being buried there? Stories could be, or books could be written about anything like that.
Sounds like an interesting story. And we have another question. Speaking of bugs.
Yeah, bugs. My name is David Bugs Stover. I'm from Wyoming County, and I presently live on Twin Falls State Park. And my question to you is, if I could bring 3 or 4 people up for a couple of weeks this coming spring and help you clear out your mill pond, could you help us study the technical aspects of your mill? Because at Twin Falls we have the old Foley mill. All that exists now is the stone base and some odds and ends, and the wheels are still there. And we would love to rebuild that mill. I don't know if we'll ever use it to commercially grind corn, but it'd be a real nice tourist attraction. And we've been, that's been on the back burner now for about 50 years at Twin Falls State Park since it started. But I promise you, I'll find you 3 or 4 people. We'll come out there if we have to get down in there and shovel the muck out. I got to be real careful with that statement, but, and would love to help you if you just teach us about how mills can be rebuilt.
I keep some. In fact, I've got the handbook that goes with the turbines when they were sold to us, probably back in the 1880s, and that sounds good. The only thing is that, do you have an end loader or a backhoe that you could bring with you?
I could hire one, yes sir.
No.
Well, here's the thing though. My uncle lives on Hands Creek. You probably know where that is.
Oh,
but anyway, he's got a big old farm there. We could stay on his property and not bother you, except when we got up about 5 a.m., come down there and help you out. And he's got a great big tractor. I could probably pressure him into...
Who is that?
I'm sorry?
What's his name?
Oh, his name is James McGrady.
Okay.
He's been to your mill a few times. I've been there once or twice with him, yeah. But anyway, dead serious. We'd like to get this thing rebuilt down at Twin Falls. It's a Foley mill from about 1870. Burnt down finally for the last time in 1918. And we finally found the stone. So I promise you, we'll help you out as much as we can for a couple of weeks if you'll help us out. We'll do it either way, but
Call and talk with me and we'll work something out. Sounds good to me.
That's great.
Don't hold this against me now. I'm the only Republican elected in Wyoming County Courthouse since 1934.
Bridging, that's what we do. We bridge. We bridge on this show. That's right.
There's another branch of the Reed family here, Clayton Reed, who's sitting right there. And so when I was away in college and everything, I came home to visit my grandmother, and we got talking about the Civil War and some of the Reeds that had fought in the Civil War and the Mustaines that had fought and so forth. And so I was studying history, and I'd learned that most of the South before and during the Civil War was Democrat. But most of our Reeds who fought for the South, but they were most of them were Republicans. So I said to my grandmother, I said, well, why are they Republicans and yet they fought for the South, which was Democrat? And through clenched teeth, she said, after the war, they got rich. That was her explanation of, and it all came about from her living through the Depression. It was all Herbert Hoover's fault, and it's awful to be like I am.
We like talking to characters, and we're glad to have you, Mr. Mustaine. So I just have one more question. What do you think might help encourage more young people to learn these kind of traditional skills?
I don't really know, and I should know because I'm a 41-year school teacher and 26 years as a principal, and great grandkids that are in high school. I wish our schools could do more like the vocational schools at Greenbrier East and James Monroe, to come out and teach the kids about what does open pollinated corn mean, what does stone grinding mean, and so forth. But it does. One of my great grandsons that I think's here, there's so many of them I can't. Evan, he comes and helps me some and seems to want to learn, and the fact he's here tonight I think means that too. But I don't know, it's a big problem, and as Mr. Schaefer said, they all want to be on a computer or something, and the last superintendent I worked for never had any use for me, because it was about the time that Governor Caperton was pushing computers in the schools and so forth, and she thought I was slow learning how to run a computer, which I was. I didn't have time to learn. So I used to tell her that when they invented a computer, they would pick up bales of hay out of a field, or if I had two boys that got in a fight, I could stick their fingers in it and it would say, this one started and this one didn't. Then I was going to give me one. And she thought I was, as you all are seeing right now, clear off of my rocker. They're wonderful things, but
it's a tough question. I mean,
politics again. You know, our president has discovered. What do they call that? True.
I don't
know. Where you send messages, you know. What? Whatever.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause for Mr. Mustaine? Thank you so much for being here. Wait, there's more.
That's the other thing I want to thank Roxy for discovering Second Creek, and you all of you, and the people at the Cultural Center in Charleston have been awful good to me and helped me. And I even wrote a little grant at one point and got $8,000 to paint the mill. My uncle was. That's the other thing that bothers me. I haven't said this. There was 20 mills on Second Creek, all of them water powered. Woolen mills, sawmills, grist mills, and so forth. And there's 3 of us left, which Mr. Napier has pictures of them in his calendar. Well, I was riding down toward where it goes into the Greenbrier River, and there was a pile of debris. And it was what used to be Nichols Mill. The barn builder guy had tore it down to redo the lumber and make houses out of it. And see, I'm really showing how bad off I am. That, you know, to me, that lumber was intended by the good Lord to be a mill, not a $1 million home somewhere. But it just hit me that, my gosh, if that's happened to that one, how long is it going to be before it happens to ours?
And you mentioned before that you wanted to thank Roxy Todd. We've talked a lot about Roxy. Can I ask you to stand up, Roxy? Sorry, so that Roxy Todd is a producer. I just wanted to recognize and her work for sure. Roxy Todd is a producer with soul. I will agree with that. Gibbs Kinderman. Okay, we're going to take another quick break, and then I want you all to start thinking about anything else, any kind of story ideas. Really quickly, we'll wrap this up. Take about 15 minutes. We'll hear another beautiful song from the musicians, and then we'll take about 15 minutes to take more audience questions about maybe some ideas that you have about your hometown and your community. So stick around.
That's the way sometimes we say it's just that one. Just that one.
Hey, great to see you, Gibbs. Yeah, great to see you. How you been? Good. Are you there? No, actually, my wife's family. We're in Whitfield. Yeah, in Charleston. Been there since February. So we were in Wesleyan before that. Yeah. Well, there was a probably like a 20-person lineup. That was one of them. It was a financial issue. But we're settling well. We like being close by. Henry's teaching piano in middle school there. All right. Yeah, we have a baby on the way, first one. So good. March. Yeah. How are you? Good. Good. Hey, good talking with you. Love to see you.
It's your turn. If you have any ideas, story ideas, or and you still want to share them, we'd love to hear them. I think Molly's still got the microphone, so if you have some, we'd like to hear them. Anybody want to raise your hand? Tell us more. There's one.
Megan Hamilton from Fayetteville. Obviously, the impact of your show on the community is in front of us, so thank you so much. We're really grateful for what you've done. I have about 15 story ideas. I'm not going to run through all of them. Everyone can take a nap. No, I'm just going to touch on a few of them. And my ideas You know, I recognize we're here tonight to respect existing traditions, which are so critical, and to try to see them be maintained and continued, and that's super valuable. I'm also interested in new traditions, and coming from Fayetteville, I'm really interested in what the next West Virginia is going to be, and I know it's going to have its roots in the old West Virginia, but it's also going to have to do with some new things. So I had a really great conversation with a woman named Sierra Haven who grew up in Fayetteville, and for years and years she would see people going off into the woods with all these ropes and stuff, but she didn't know what they were doing. And so she went to school at WVU and she started climbing in a gym, on a wall in a gym, a climbing wall in a gym. And one weekend, a bunch of her climber friends in the gym said, "We're going on a trip." She said, "Well, where are you going?" And they said, "Well, we're going to go climbing outside." She said, "Where?" And they said, "Fayetteville." And so Fayetteville right now is like a major climbing destination for the East Coast. But so far as we know, there's only two natives of Fayetteville that have become climbers. So as West Virginia becomes sort of a center for outdoor recreation, and as that starts to power some of the economies, I'm really interested in that juncture between native West Virginians and the people that move here, and who is part of the outdoor recreation scene and who isn't. So that, to me, is an interesting idea. And then there's an organization called Active Southern West Virginia that I think would be great. Have you guys done that?
I've just heard of them. I don't think we've done too much on them. But they have a program that's pretty much you can pick it up and create a running group in your community. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I have a lot of different ideas. And then the one other idea, and I don't know if you've already done this, but when I was in Baltimore at the Art Center we helped found, I got to present Hazel Dickens. And I've just been struck by how many West Virginians I talk to that aren't familiar with Hazel Dickens. And her legacy is so amazing, and she has family. I know her nephews that are up in Maryland on the Maryland line that make amazing music, and it would be great to see her recognized. And I have a bunch of other ideas that I'll email you or something, but thanks a lot.
Inside Appalachia at wvpublic.org. All right, any others?
I would like to see you do something on herbs and, you know, how there's a big interest, I think, in more natural healing instead of using drugs, and how people are all hooked on drugs and stuff. I'd like to see, you know, more of that and something on that. I know there probably is in West Virginia, but I don't know a lot about it, and I'd like to know more about it.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. I hope somebody's taking notes. I will try. Oh, sweet.
Hi, my name's Wendy Peters. I'm from Daniels, West Virginia, just outside of Beckley here.
Hi, Wendy.
Another thing that I think will be interesting, my great-grandmother quilted, and the kind of quilts that she made were like an Appalachian tradition. She grew up on what used to be the old Camp Creek Forest area. And I think that would be interesting to do something on quilting. But I'm also a teacher, and I like what we were talking about keeping those traditions alive. We talk so much about STEM and STEAM now, but I think that those hands-on things that, you know, we've used in the past, I think that is something that schools could do, maybe do like an Appalachian heritage thing that maybe we could partner with PBS. So that would be something interesting, an idea. So.
Thank you. Any more? All right, well, if you have anything else and if you want to take your program, I have a pen here that you're welcome to. There's also, I believe, a stack of pens out in the lobby if you'd like to write those down. Again, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. I was so excited to see the folks that came. So we've just got a few things to run through, and then I'll let you go. We want to thank the folks who helped us produce this show. We had help producing these segments on Inside Appalachia from the West Virginia folklorist Emily Hilliard and the West Virginia Let me try that again. We can take this again, right? So we're experimenting and recording a podcast, so I'm going to take 2. Ready? Okay, thanks. We had help producing these segments on Inside Appalachia from West Virginia folklorist Emily Hilliard and the West Virginia Humanities Council. Music in today's show was provided by Trevor Hammonds and Sarah Riley of Pocahontas County. We also want to give a special thanks to Hawk Knob Cidery in Greenbrier County, Tamarack in Beckley, and Art Wool's artist Susan Feller and her art show Glimpses Inside Appalachia. Also, a special thanks to the Bickey family and Shane Pierce here at the Raleigh Playhouse and Theater for the opportunity to be here and stand on this wonderful stage and this beautiful establishment. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter if you're a Twitterer. If you're not, it's cool. But if you do get on Twitter, you can follow us at In Appalachia. Shoot us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org, and you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, wvpublic.org, or wherever you get your podcasts, and take it with you and listen wherever you want and on your own time. And we hope you'll stay connected with us. We've gotten, there's a place out in the lobby that you could write down your email address and your contact information so we can shoot you an Inside Appalachia newsletter, so we hope you'll stay connected that way as well. And of course, Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting. I also want to say thank you to the crew, all of the camera, everybody backstage, out in the parking lot right now that helped to make this happen from West Virginia Public Broadcasting, so thank you very much. I'm Jessica Lilly. Good night, everybody. Thank you. And the bar is still open downstairs if anybody's interested.